This is Dave Whitmire. I'm sitting here with Joseph Rizzi, getting ready to discuss something that's important to all of us, natural desalination. It's a new concept that's not been tried, and it seems to be a wonder in all aspects of conservation. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Joe Rizzi and have him tell us exactly what natural desalination is.
I'd like to just do a quick recap of what natural desalination is. It is all proven technologies. I'm an analyst and I put things together. And this is about putting, if you look on the slide, it's if you're starting out in the ocean, it's about 2.5 to 3 miles off the coast of California. You go down about 1,800 feet, and that's where you'd actually be putting your desalination field. It would be offshore and way below the sea level. But by going down to 1,800 feet, you're actually going below 90% of the ocean life. So there's less than 10% of the ocean life down at 1,800 feet. The reverse osmosis membranes are suspended above the ocean floor, so there's not the sediment and stuff. Anything that's actually coming in contact with the reverse osmosis membrane that is heavy will actually naturally flow down the hill or the canyon and continue on downhill. The process is all about trying to use the weight of water, because down at 1,800 feet you get 814 pounds per square inch on the outside of the reverse osmosis membrane, where the water is actually trying to be forced into the inner part of the reverse osmosis membrane. And these membranes are like hair-like fibers, and it's the older style. It's been around for over 60 years. But these older style ones actually have 10 times more surface area than the newer current ones. The reason they went to the newer ones is because they're easier to clean. And the cleaning process isn't needed in this kind of a situation. It was tested off the coast of Italy. They used to call it submarine reverse osmosis or submarine desalination. But anyways, you do your reverse osmosis offshore about 2.5 miles and down about 1,800 feet. You have a small container that's actually pressurized to atmospheric pressure. And you do that by putting a hose from that container up to the surface, whether it goes straight up or whether it goes all the way to shore. It doesn't really matter, because it's not really sucking in air or anything. It's really a pressure release. So you're trying, that way you can have the difference between the 814 pounds per square inch of the weight of the water, and what you're looking for is the difference between the 814 pounds per square inch on the outside and the 0 pounds per square inch on the inside. That forces the water through, not the other kinds of materials. Everything else that's larger particles than the water is filtered out. So only the water actually goes into the reverse osmosis membrane. It's all focused to go downhill. If you look at the chart or the diagram, it all goes downhill into the tank using gravity. And then from the tank, it's actually going downhill that 2.5 to 3 miles back to shore. Now that's key, because you're really wanting to use the nature's power to move the water the largest amount of the distance. Then you're down at about 2,000 feet, and then you're using wave power, which has been in existence with CETO Wave off the coast of Australia for the last 5 to 10 years. And you use that to actually pump up all the clean water. It's actually all fresh water. But I actually would propose to go one step further, use a second set of CETO Wave power machines, and then push that water up the hill. Because most of the time, whenever you're doing this, you're really close to where there is a large hill real close by. And you're wanting to put it up about 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet. That way you're actually pressurizing it to go back inland. Because that's where one of your biggest problems are when you're doing a desalination plant, is to get the water back uphill to where it actually needs to go, or where it's been before.
Okay, so this is something that all this information that you've given us is established practice. It's nothing new here. It's just putting it all together, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. The reverse osmosis has been done offshore, off the coast of Italy. And what they did when they were doing it off the coast of Italy, that piece there, they were actually using regular desalination tubes, and they would bring them down to that depth. They would have a few motors that actually used to circulate the water. And then they also had a motor down there, or a pump, in order to pump that water all the way, that 2.5 miles, all the way back uphill. They determined when they did that study that they could save over 50% of the power needed in order to do the reverse osmosis. But since they actually had to have circulation pumps down there, and they had to pump it uphill, that's why they didn't get the zero power that I'm talking about on here. So that was proven, and what they did is they said, okay, well, it works great. Why are they not using it now? That's an unknown, but what they really said in the study is they were looking at it more for islands, and they were using it more to supplement for islands. So it really never caught on, or never really became any kind of real practice in regular desalination. As far as the tube between from your reverse osmosis field to your CETO Wave, you would do that using horizontal drilling. You would drill down from the CETO Wave power pumps. You go down to 2,000 foot, and then you come back up. That's proven. Been in the oil industry for a long time. CETO Wave has actually been in existence for almost 10 years now, and they've been actively working with it for the last 5 years. They can desalinate using zero power right now, and they have been for 5 years, using just the CETO Wave machines.
Oh, really? Now, we discussed this a few months ago. What's happened in the last few months that's brought this all to the forefront?
Well, I am starting to contract with an Australian company, and it was really interesting because I actually got the contact through oil contacts. I was on some of my websites, and I was trying to get more information regarding desalination for oil companies. And they were actually very interested in trying to invest in it. And what I'm understanding and figuring out is the fact that oil companies have actually been out at sea for the last 50 years, or 60 years. So they're not as scared of water. It seems like the water companies and officials are as scared of actually being out at sea. It's not a concept that they're really used to, and they're very much afraid of all the maintenance costs. How are you going to do this? How are you going to manage this? And see, the oil companies have actually been out there for 50, 60 years, so it's not a big issue. They see it as, oh, okay, it's just where your source is. Instead of, they got a lot of their easier sources on land for their oil and gas, and they realized that they needed to go offshore, and there was a lot of extra resources out there. So that's where they were. So they're not worried about it. So that's where I'm actually going to start my work, and I'm going to try to start focusing more on the oil and gas. I'm still going to work with try to work with state and local authorities and water folks. But like I say, they seem to be afraid of water, or at least being out in the water.
Is that why there's no interest by them? Do you have any idea why there's not more interest from the state and federal people?
Yes. Yeah, they have their own projects and their own what they're wanting to do, but they also see natural desalination as something that's unproven. And even if I tell them all the parts are actually proven, they don't believe it. They want to have somebody actually have already got something totally done, and they can say, oh yeah, it works, and it's fine. I've given them all the cost figures. I've given them all the other kinds of figures. Nothing seems to persuade them as to what's going on. And all I can say is it really appears to be that their whole industry is very slow to change, and they do not have any real dealings with being out at sea. So it is a real challenge for them. But they really need to sort of realize that the sea is the holy grail of where all our water is. It is the largest repository in the world of fresh water if we use it right. And natural desalination can get all of that water, instead of bringing it inland as salt water, it brings it all in as fresh, clean water.
Where is their desalination done currently? What countries or what areas of the world use desalination as we speak?
Well, Saudi Arabia does a lot of desalination right now, and they understand that they're actually doing all the desalination on land. They took our technology that we gave them 50 years ago, and they built these huge plants. You can go out and look at it, and they're miles long. A mile-long facility here in the U.S. would never fly. It just would never fly. It takes up way too much room in order to get the amount of water that California or any place really needs. And that space, for them, it's not an issue. The other thing is they have all the money, or they have a huge amount of money. So building those plants and doing the infrastructure and all that, it's not an issue for them. It is for a lot of other countries. You know, I'm trying to make natural desalination $20 an acre foot. That's inexpensive when you look at it. Not $2,000 an acre foot. And that's the $20 an acre foot is an operating cost. That's not the initial cost of actually installing it to begin with. But once it's been installed, your operating cost is around $20 an acre foot.
How does that compare to operating a normal desalination plant?
A normal desalination plant normally has an operating cost of anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000. So you're talking almost 200 times difference between the two.
Really?
And the real reason that is because there's not anybody involved in it. I mean, once you've got it set up, it's pretty much all automated. There's not all the maintenance. There's not the buildings. There's not the power. Power is a huge cost when you're talking about desalination.
Right.
And when you're looking at the Saudis, would they have all their desalination plants? It's not an issue for them because they have all the oil. They can create as much power as they want. They don't really have those constraints. So since it's really cheap for them, but it's not for everybody else. So this is why I was trying to come up with natural desalination and actually make sure that it's not only good for drought years, but it's also good all year long.
How does the production price of natural desalination compare to that of river water, for instance, or coming from Lake Shasta, which is a normal supplier?
Normal river water, a lot of people will think of as free, but it's not. When you actually go down to the cities and ask them, well, how much do you pay for your water, like the city of Benicia, where I live, we pay anywhere around $40 to $60 an acre foot on a normal basis. Now, we could spend up to $100 an acre foot in drought years or for some other contracts. So you really want to make sure that whatever kind of desalination that you're going to choose is actually going to be able to compete with what you're really trying to do. In Carlsbad, for instance, they have a huge amount of cost there, but they're actually trying to only provide 7% of their water continually for the next 20 years using desalination. And spreading that really large cost with the other costs when they actually do get regular water from other sources, like from Sacramento. Then they can actually sort of balance out the rates, so it's less expensive for them. But if they actually had natural desalination, that would cheapen the whole process altogether.
Wow. Is there any impact on the ocean itself by doing this? In other words, the thing that's going to come up in all these discussions is you're taking this water from the ocean. What damage are you causing? Is there any side effect?
Actually, that's one of the really good things about natural desalination versus your regular desalination. The biggest part about regular desalination is the fact it costs a lot, the $2,000 an acre foot, and all of the energy it takes in order to produce the natural or the regular desalination. It costs a lot in the energy. They either have to have a nuclear plant real close by, or they try to put a power plant really close to the desalination plant. In natural desalination, since you're actually down 1,800 feet and 2.5 miles offshore, you have a much cleaner source of water. You got to think, who's the biggest polluter of water? It's humans. So as the water comes away from the ocean, or from our lands, it takes a long way in order for it to actually dissipate or get diluted. So it doesn't have much of effect. So when you're off the coast 2.5 to 3 miles, that's a long way. And down 1,800 feet, you've avoided all your fish. So that's one of the other big problem, or not fish, but any kind of ocean life. In regular desalination, they have the pumps that where they're pulling their water, their intakes, are really close to shore. Well, as I had on my diagram, you'll see that 90% of your ocean life is on that first 660 feet. That's where they're pulling the water from. So that's one of the big issues that they have with regular desalination that you don't have with natural desalination, because you're down so low. Now, the other problem is they create a brine. Now, natural desalination doesn't create a brine, never does. There is a buildup or an increase in salinity near where the reverse osmosis membrane field is, but it never gets to a brine. Brine is where you actually take water out of the ocean, you squeeze the water part out of it, and you end up with all the salt. And they do that over and over and over again until they get a really high concentration of salty water. That never occurs in natural desalination.
Now, is there any part of this natural desalination that is untested and unproven? You were telling me earlier that everything has been redone. Take me through step by step and tell me why you know this will work.
I know it'll work because it's all been tested. You have the submarine reverse osmosis offshore. They did the tests in Italy. They have proven the fact it works. I've actually even spoken to several of the water people that have PhDs in water and all that kind of stuff, and they tell me, you're right, it is zero power. But it is offshore, and that's their main issue. You have the drilling of your the pipes down and horizontally across. That's been done for years. The CETO Wave is currently in use for years. And like I said, you could look at CETO Wave as the same kind of concept. I don't like the way they've implemented it, because they're actually still implementing it on land. And what happens is at least in California, land is a premium. And when you actually start moving that fresh water on land and creating the brine and all that kind of stuff, you cause all the problems. And that's where you have to rethink. Why not do it offshore? Let's use nature. And that's where I prefer to use nature. But if you really look at it and when you talk to the water folks, that's what I try to tell them. If you don't believe the fact that there is zero power desalination, you're absolutely wrong. You can look at off the coast of Australia. They've been doing it for the last 5 years.
Now, wave action for generating power. You're doing this as in conjunction with building the plant. Is that what you're saying? In other words, you're going to combine not only natural desalination, but wave action to take care of your power needs, rather than use petroleum products or whatever it takes to power normal systems. The pumping part, you're going to use wave action. Is that what you're saying?
I actually use 3 different powers. Okay, we actually use the weight of water, which is called osmosis, in order to actually force the water through the reverse osmosis membranes.
Okay.
That's power number 1. That's the weight of water. Then you're using gravity for conveyance to the shore. And then you're using wave power only as pumps. Waves go back and forth. That's a natural pumping action. In the oil industry, we've seen that a lot. On all of our oil fields, we got this back and forth. That's a normal pumping action. That pumps huge amounts of water. In the CETO Wave, they actually pump 500 million gallons per unit per day. That's what they have given me as statistics. That's 10 times the amount of water that is going to be being produced by Carlsbad.
Wow.
Those same wave pumps will be able to put out 1,740 psi according to their documentation. Not only that, the wave pumps put out in the ocean are actually a positive, not a negative environmental impact. They actually attract life to their pumps and actually create more life than what actually would have been there. So it's actually a positive value in the whole equation. But then also when you take that same power of those waves, pumping the water up, and then pump it up the hill for the next stage. When you actually look at, in the state of California, they're trying to build 2 twin tunnels, 35 miles across, 35-mile tunnels. Well, if you add 2 times 35 is 70 miles. Bakersfield, which is the lowest part of the Central Valley, is less than 70 miles away from the coast. So if you did that same 70-mile tunnel from the ocean, you would have a permanent source of fresh, clean water all year long, and it would be able to go directly into Bakersfield. Now, a lot of people think, well, how high is Bakersfield? Bakersfield is only 350 to 400 feet above sea level. So if you're pumping at 1,700 pounds per square inch, let's say you find a hill that's at least 1,000 feet high, which there are a lot of them around that area.
Right.
You pump it up that 1,000 feet. You put a water container at the top, and then let that water go to down to Bakersfield. You have 600 feet of head to push that water. That is super fast. That is a lot of water that can go right into Bakersfield. Once it gets to Bakersfield, it goes in the San Joaquin River, and it'll go all the way down to the Sacramento River, or to the Sacramento, and right out the bay. So that helps the delta as well. It also helps all the farmers along the way. It also helps for subsidence, groundwater recharging, all of that. The more water you get down into Bakersfield, the more it's going to be for everybody, including all of the crops that they can actually grow. The more crops that they grow in the Central Valley, that means the more CO2 absorbing plants that they have. All that pollution that they would take right out of the air. That means less global warming. And there's just so many good benefits of actually having more water in the Central Valley. Same with Southern California. They produce a lot of food, but you got to get that water back into the eastern part of the state.
Now, you mentioned these pumps. We have a world population problem, as everybody's aware. There are billions of people, and there are going to be trillions of people in not very many years. Can this be applied anywhere to any ocean, or is there a limit to where you can use this type of thing?
You can use the technology anywhere you can get to that 1,800 foot depth. Now, that could occur farther off coast, and so that could be more expensive. Like if you wanted to do it in San Francisco, you're actually going out to the Farallon Islands. That's about 15, 16 miles off the coast. So that's a lot farther off. Israel, another example. They're about 10 to almost 15 miles off coast in order for you to get that depth. Now, once you're out about that depth, you normally get a shelf. Almost always you're getting a shelf right at that level or right close to that area. And that's close to where you'd actually put your wave pumps. Not necessarily way inland, but it's actually close to where you get that shelf, because the natural water that you're having coming up that hill helps create those waves with the wind, and you're wanting that.
In other words, you could apply this worldwide. Wherever you have an ocean shelf that goes to at least 1,800 feet, you can set up a plant like this, is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Wow. So you have the world's water pollution problem, production problem, pardon me, solved.
Yeah. Not the pollution, but yes, the production problem. Yes, we could have all the water we want in California as well as around the world. Australia, and that's why I'm really happy the fact I'm working with an Australian company, because they have very severe droughts as well. And they're going to need more water. They have a large portion of their land that's in an arid area, and that will be very helpful to them.
Now, is there any limit to the size of this type of plant that you're aware of? Or is there an ideal plant size for this?
No, there's not. I mean, it can be scalable. It can go down as far as small as the conveyance that you're having back to the shore. I mean, when you have those wave power machines and you're actually pumping a lot of water, you could be pumping way too much water, or not underutilizing the pumps is what I'm trying to say.
Or you could use the pump power for something else. You could produce electricity, right?
Absolutely. And that's what they do in Australia. And that's why CETO, if you actually look at how their progression is, they've actually been more prone to go to electrical at this point in time, because electrical power generation is something that they are more inclined to work with, and it's easier for them to deal with. But yes, once it's on shore, you could use the water for electrical generation. It's like hydropower.
This diagram you show the ocean's twilight zone of the area where you would get this. Is this a worldwide map of the ocean, or does it vary from area to area around the world, or is this pretty much?
This is pretty much ocean-wide. I mean, this is what they see, and the reason I have it as those three different zones on that diagram is because the first zone is your sunlight zone, down to 660 feet. That's where 90% of your ocean life is. But then the next is actually called the twilight zone, and that's down to 3,300 feet. Now, mine is actually around 1,800 feet, so it's somewhere around in the middle of the twilight zone. But there are some, I think, certain types of wavelengths that actually make it into the twilight zone, versus in the very bottom zone, which is considered the dark zone, where no rays of light actually makes it down that far. Now, I'm not saying that there's zero ocean life down there. I'm just saying that you've already eliminated 90%. Or more than 90% of your ocean life by placing your desalination field offshore. And if you look at it, there's really not a lot of competition out there. So you can grow your desalination field as large as you really want it. You can actually have an overbalance. You can actually have more of your desalination field, and it puts a lot less stress on it because you're not having to have it at full production capacity. And then as you pump out the water, it comes out. The whole system is set up that you can have more fresh water coming in to your pipes and the whole system, and it would only be designed as based upon how much you're pumping out. You could change your pumps to be wind powered, or use some other kind of thing other than wave power. I'm putting it all together as a natural process to make it easy for everybody to see that, hey, there is no environmental issues at all in any of this process.
The only pumping that's actually necessary is once the water has been purified and has moved to shore, you have to pump it from where it arrives on shore. Other than that, all the power is provided. It's all natural.
That is correct. And if you look at the wave power, that's the actual natural as well. So you get all 100% natural power producing the whole thing.
Wow. Will countries other than those that have big bucks, so to speak, like the U.S. and Europe and that sort of thing, I don't know how else to say that, these foreign countries that are so poor that really need the water worse than we do, actually, because they have no water, is it sensible that they would be looking at something like this?
Probably not. And the main reason is because it is very expensive to set up. It's like a dam. When you're actually in a poor country, it's hard to create a dam. So this is very similar. When you're looking at Carlsbad cost $1 billion to set up. And it's only going to give you 56,000 acre feet a year. For that same amount, in the comparison with natural desalination, $1 billion would give you 1 million acre feet a year. Now that's a lot of water. When you look at California, we're looking at, we put in our aqueducts to go down south, it's typically that we're looking at 5 million acre feet going down south. In a drought year like this, we're only pushing about 3.5 million acre feet down there. So an extra 1 million acre feet is a huge amount of water.
In other words, it would be easy to build one plant and produce a third of the water that's going to Southern California right now.
Absolutely, and actually it would be very, you could actually produce it really close to where they actually need it, and actually put it right up into their reservoir, Lake, I think it's at Turner, down there, and their reservoir, and it could go directly in there using only wave power. And it would all be 100% there. And once you get it into their main reservoir down there, it could be distributed to almost anywhere in Southern California.
Wow, that's amazing. How is the maintenance going to be taken care of in this situation? You put these filters down in the ocean, and what's their life expectancy?
That's a great question. When you talk to an environmentalist, and what do you hear about for plastics? You know, when they say, "Oh, well, you got plastics out in the ocean; it's going to last 100 years, 1,000 years," and that's exactly what you got reverse osmosis about. You know, this is a plastic or a rubbery type of a substance that's actually going down there. But on plastics, you actually have it close to the sunlight, and when it's exposed to the sunlight, it has degradation and stuff like that. I'm looking at just being conservative and saying, okay, it's going to be about 30 years. Now, it could be a lot longer than that because you're actually down, remember, you're in the twilight zone, down there where there's very little ocean life and there's very little sunlight. So there's not really a lot of things to really harm the reverse osmosis. If you or the membranes. Your number one problem in reverse osmosis membranes is life growing on it. So by putting it down where you're at, you're avoiding that number one problem. Number two problem is the chemicals that they use, which is your chlorine bleach, to kill the life that's actually on the reverse osmosis membrane. So I'm taking out those two major problems right there. Now, you also mentioned about, well, how do you do maintenance down there? Okay, this has been a big issue with a lot of water folks that I've talked to, and it's like, because they don't want to go out in the water at all. But in the oil industry, which I was in there for 23 years, we use robotics nowadays. We have robots that go down there. And when you actually have robots, they can actually sit there and physically clean it. But you actually have the ocean currents that actually have these that go by. And since these are all hair-like fibers and stuff, those fibers rub up against each other. They are naturally cleaning each other. But I'm not really answering the question of how would you otherwise clean it. You do have a pressure of over 800 pounds per square inch. But you can do a pressure, same with like a pressure washer, where you're actually just increasing. You're taking the outside pressure and just increasing it and pushing water at it. That will also help clean off any of the debris that actually might be stuck to it. But a better way of doing it is actually using air. You have an air source right close by, because that's where you have that 0 pounds per square inch. You have an air source from the surface. You can put bubbles underneath it. And as those bubbles come up along it, it relieves all the pressure that's actually around it, and it allows all the debris to naturally fall off, since it is heavier, and come on down. So bubbles is actually one of the really great ways of dealing with it. The other is you can have a valve in the system to close it off, and add some water back from the source. Turn off your wave pumps for a second and feed the fresh water back in. Reverse flow. Absolutely. That would flush out all of your debris out of your system. You don't even have to bring up those reverse osmosis membranes in order to clean them. Now, you would make the system set up so you could actually detach or add, subtract, replace them, and be able to bring them up on them, annual or every 5, 10, 20 years, whatever's needed in order to replace or deal with them.
Is there a minimum life expectancy that you determined from talking to these people? Do they have some idea what you're looking at as far as life expectancy of those filters?
They don't have a life expectancy, and that's generally typical of the industry as a whole, because you actually have to look at the environment in which it's actually being deployed in. What is the pH? What is this, that, and the other thing? There's a lot of factors that actually go involved in that. But this is where I go back to that same Italian study with the submarine reverse osmosis, because that's the kind of reverse osmosis membranes that they were using. They were using the hollow fibers. And when they were doing that, they determined that there was no need to use a pre-filtering system down there. Now, they were expecting to have to do a pre-filter, and in most reverse osmosis membrane desalination plants, they actually have to do a pre-filter in order to get rid of as much of the larger debris as possible. But in this case, they didn't need to. And that's a really good thing, because with the reverse osmosis fiber having 10 times the surface area, that means less things will actually stick to it. It allows the gravity to pull that stuff off, because it's not sucked to the individual strands of reverse osmosis membrane.
So you still don't have a time figure as to how long these will last?
Absolutely not.
Have they figured anything, 5 years, 10 years?
No, I mean, it could be 60, it could be 100 years. They don't know. Of course, a manufacturer is not going to manufacture it until they've actually done the study and actually had them out there for 30 years or whatever. Okay. So there's no way of really telling. And that is something that I'm really trying to work with a research institute, or I'm trying to get someone like in Monterey area, or someone at a university close to the ocean that is actually able to help with a study to actually say, okay, let's put some of this out there and let's get some water flowing and let's see how long it actually can last. And I suspect that they're just not going to have any problems, because there's just nothing out there.
Nothing to cause a problem.
It's absolutely that's the biggest problem is the fact that there's just really not much out there to cause those kinds of issues. If you were in the sunlight zone, which is what most of your desalination is, you will have a lot of problems. There's not all the pressure around, and you're taking water that has a lot of oxygen and a lot of nutrients in there. Even if you do a good filtering, you're still going to let some of that through, and that's where you have the problems.
What do you see natural desalination doing for the world population? Is it an answer to some of the problems, at least?
It is, absolutely, because you add food to the world as well as water. Water is the essence of life, if you wish. The more fresh water that we have available, more food that can be grown. So you have not only your thirst, you got your hunger as well. So getting that fresh water to the world is really needed, and that's what we're going to need in order to support a very large population.
When do you think this operation in Australia will get going? Have you got a figure from them at all?
I don't have a figure. We're still working on the contracts and stuff on that to figure out how the communications go, non-disclosure and all that kind of stuff. So I don't have any figures there.
Where do you see natural desalination in 5 years?
I would like to see it actually implemented at least in California. And I think if California can lead in it, I think that's everybody else would follow and start seeing. I mean, that's where desalination came from, was from California. You know, our research facilities. Let's do the one step further and actually, prove the whole concept is a viable and cost-effective way of dealing with it. Let's get rid of these old paradigms that desalination has to cost a lot of money. It's free water right out there in the ocean. We have the largest repository ever. Let's utilize it.
How much water would be necessary to take over San Diego's total supply, as an example? You said that they just added 56 million acre feet supply. What would it take to put their operation totally on desalination? Do you know how many acre feet they use?
The 56,000 acre feet that they're getting, they're going to be getting from desalination is only 7% of their total water.
Okay.
So if they spent the same for desalination using natural desalination, they would have gotten near 100% of their water from desalination.
Really? One plant with that expense would do what they're getting 7% from?
Correct.
Wow.
And they would only be paying $20 an acre foot in operating costs after the construction.
And their operating costs now are what?
It's somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. They haven't really given real accurate figures there, but that's typically where desalination is typically
now,
at.
In California, as an example, San Diego, LA, Santa Barbara are the three places you mentioned earlier that are ideal for this location. Any other places in California that would work well?
Yeah, Monterey is great. Anywhere down in Southern California, almost all the places, they have a real close shelf. It's not that that's not that far off. If, like I said, if you wanted to do it off of San Francisco, you'd have to go out to the Farallon Islands. Then you have to worry about the pipeline from the Farallons to. You would still pressurize it at the Farallons. You'd still use your wave action wave out there, but even if you look at it, it's 15 miles. But where does San Francisco get their water now? They get it from the Sierras. That's a whole lot farther away than getting it from the Farallon Islands. So yes, they could do it, and it would be a lot closer, and they'd have a more stable water source. So they could do it anywhere along the coast. It just depends on how close do you want to have, how far off is that pipeline from the shoreline to your desalination field and your wave action.
All right. Tell me the best thing about natural desalination in a paragraph.
It's zero energy. That's the biggest thing. People don't realize that there is not only CETO Wave does its own zero energy, natural desalination is all about zero energy. And I hear that too often from water folks that, desalination is very expensive. Number two, there is no environmental bad issues about it. It doesn't kill anything in pulling stuff into the pumps because it's only pulling in fresh water. There is no brine. Those are the three biggest problems, and the low cost. I mean, $20 an acre foot is really good. And now, I got the $10 an acre foot from doing the maintenance on the wave pumps. And I know that wave pumps are something that's actually moving back and forth, and that's going to take a lot more maintenance than a reverse osmosis membrane just sitting down there not doing a whole lot.
How many plants would it take to supply California's water?
If you had five of them all putting out 1 million acre feet, that would offset all of the water that's currently being dealt with for the aqueducts right now.
So that would do away with the water that Northern California is shipping south?
Yes. And not only would it stop the need for shipping the water south, but it would also be adding water into the inland valley, which would actually help the delta at the same time, because not every drop, but if more water that you're putting into the inland valley, the more water that's going to come out of the San Joaquin River as it comes out of the Bay Area. Wow. And that helps the fish, that helps the whole environment. And that's really what you're looking for.
What do you want to say to the water companies about your plan?
I'd really like to tell them, hey, you really should be giving it a try. And if you really don't have that good feeling about it, you should go out and check out an oil industry. You should come out to an offshore drilling platform, see what's going on, see what they actually can do. Because offshore drilling has been going on for 50, 60 years or more. They've been out there. Why haven't the water companies? The largest amount of water is in the oceans. That's where they should be doing their testing. That's where they should be doing it. Because that's where the water is. Yes, it does fall as rain on the land. And we can put dams and, cause other kinds of harm or issues trying to store the water here before it gets back out to the ocean. But you're at the mercy of Mother Nature and whether you have a drought year or not. And that becomes a real big issue. Now, I do understand, and I understand some of the politics around it. But it's like, hey, let's work for real solutions and not actually look at just, hey, who are we going to blame for the problem, or who's going to have to do without the water for a while or less water. Let's look at real solutions. Let's find the real solutions that are out there.
This is a sustainable solution, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Once you've established a plant, you've got a sustainable amount of water all year long, every day. There's no reason why you can't have it. Let's say you have a wave pump break. You can put in some extra backups there. That's not a problem. Or if you want, you can use just a regular power generator to pull up the water. You can still store the water on land in reservoirs and stuff. That's great.
Okay. You have a statement?
I just really wish the American people could actually hear this, and the government and the water folks can actually say, hey, wake up. There is a process out there. This isn't really anything that's new. This is something that is available right now, because every piece of it is actually being done.
You just have to put it all together.
And it's what I do, is I put things together. And I say, hey, if it's all been done before, if you put 3 parts together, then they all should work. There should be no problems.
I believe we're through.
Okay. Thank you.